senior class trip in the late 60s was Southeast Asia. So I did my military service and then was going to the university and had aspirations of going to law school. I took my LSATs and I was accepted, but I was broke. And I just have never had the disposition to be an employee. So I went down to a horseshoeing school and I never went to law school. I fell in love with shoeing horses, and that was 1974. And I've been shoeing horses ever since. And then going to the school.
Well, I'm your typical horse crazy girl, and so I grew up riding horses and doing everything I could to be at the barn and was the barn rat. So going through high school, and the normal trajectory is college, but I grew up in Hong Kong and then came to the US at 19, and I didn't have state residency anywhere. And so even going to community college was going to be out-of-state tuition. So during my gap year, while I was establishing residency, I worked at a barn and held horses for farriers and kind of got introduced to the trade and industry that way. And then I looked into what it would take to become a farrier and came across Pacific Coast Horseshoeing School. So in 2007, I came to this school and it's gone from there.
It was interesting. I was the dominant farrier in the South Sacramento area for a lot of years. So that folks coming out of a horseshoeing school would call me up and want to ride with me. And I found out that they, like I had, a pretty inferior farrier education. So we would go over just not only the aspects of horsemanship with the feet, but also the concept of running a farrier practice. Being able to make this become a small business that you own to accomplish your goals in life, and they had no clue. So after they'd ride with me for 6-8 weeks or so, they would leave and say things like, gosh, I wish you would have taught the school I was in, that type of thing. And it planted a seed. And so my original intent was to open a school, get it going, hire somebody to run it, and then go back to doing what I like to do, shoeing horses. But a couple things happened. I found that if I left the school, it didn't run the way I wanted it to run. And I really enjoyed teaching. So that was 1991, and away we went.
Well, it wasn't really on my radar at all. Growing up in Hong Kong, I taught English as a second language to locals, taught riding lessons to kids, but beyond that, I don't have much teaching education or anything like that, but it is kind of in my blood. Most of one of my aunts, two of my aunts, my grandma, and they're all educators, but it was actually mentors of mine who planted the seeds of, hey, if we had a spot for you, would you come and teach? So Bob had reached out 3 or 4 years before I actually made the move to come here and planted that seed. But then there was also another mentor of mine in Texas who was considering opening a school, and he had asked if I would teach as well. So it was just kind of a different opportunity to stay in the horse industry and the farrier industry, but be involved in a different way.
Mm-hmm. And I whined more than the other guy.
So you won.
So I got her. That's really tough when you open a school, because you just can't go to the library and get a book on how to open a horseshoeing school. I had done I'd done some graduate work with Doug Butler when he was at Sul Ross University in Alpine, Texas, and we had talked about curriculums and programs, and put together what I thought that a farrier should know. The original program was 12 weeks long, which I thought was a really good course, but through events, interviewing students and stuff, 3 months was just more than most of them can be away from families, away from work, unemployed, bills coming in. So we condensed it down to 8 weeks, and that was just marketplace that dictated that. And I was firmly committed to being able to create a student that not just tacks steel on the bottom of the feet, but understands that you're running a small business. You're able to establish credit, buy a home, raise your family. It's not just day work cowboy. And so my curriculum is based on the concept of owning a small business. And that's the niche I play in the horseshoeing school world. One of the things that's been traditional in trades is that you have to suffer to learn. And I disagree with that. I think you can still have some fun and learn. So we try to make the group a pretty cohesive group for learning. I start out just like when you're raising kids, not to be demeaning to the students, but like you're raising kids, well, when you start out, every single thing they do has oversight. And then as they go through, as the kid gets older, they're allowed to make more and more of their own decisions, suffer the consequences of bad decisions, reap the benefits of good decisions. And so the critical thinking aspect, it's in all my exams, it's in all my teaching. You know, we start out with basic anatomy. By the time we get to conformation, you have to use the stuff you learned in anatomy to understand why a horse with a certain conformation is predisposed to certain problems, and then how we're going to put them together to shoe. So I push aggressively at the students participating in critical thinking, putting everything together so that when they field, they're prepared. And then, of course, we interlace virtually everything we do with the business concept. How much we charge, why we charge, how do we justify the cost, how do we schedule clients, how do we get rid of bad clients and attract good clients. And so that's involved in virtually every lecture.
I think my role at the moment is to try and meet every student where they're at and see where their strengths are, get to know them well enough so that I know how to interact with them to connect, not only just to get to know them, but to connect and to get through to them when they're struggling through something. So beyond everything Bob just talked about, for me personally, that's what I work hard to do is what makes a student tick? How can I help them through a tough moment when they're having that tough moment? Because we have them all when we're shoeing horses. They're multiple, if not numerous, every day shoeing a horse. So for me, that's kind of my focus at the moment. And through that, seeing where students have struggled, that's helped us kind of develop small little appendixes to the overall curriculum. We have a little gap here, let's fill that. So we've worked together to develop classroom appendix additions and then forge work stuff and all of that. Sometimes it's hard, very, very hard. You have people who, it's a heavy forge day and you have 4 or 5 hours where we're going to be working in the forge. Some people want you checking in with them every 2 minutes. Some people don't want to be messed with at all. So the very first week while they're at the school, we get a pretty good idea of who's who, because that first week it's a huge learning curve. We're jumping into the deep end and we get to know how people react to struggle. But how to manage that. Do you have any insight?
Yeah, well, I started out by telling them in the very beginning that if you had trouble in high school, had trouble when you were in school, and you were told that you had learning difficulties, maybe that you were not taught the way you learn, right? And so maybe we can approach it a little different. So if you have trouble memorizing, and you have trouble retaining stuff, we got different ways to teach you. We have all these anatomical displays, and these are all open for the students. But those kinesthetic learners have to have hands-on and that stuff. And so we try to let them know that it's not that you're stupid and you can't learn. It's just that you haven't been taught the way you learn. And once we discover that, we're going to be able to get you going. The funny thing is that the kids just say, I can't memorize anything. I've never been able to memorize things. And then you'll hear them singing like 10 songs in the vans going somewhere. And then they replay movie scenes and they're acting both roles and they remember every word. So yeah, you can know, you can memorize. It's just not presented to you in a way that you can retain it and memorize it. So that's our goal as teachers, is to find out how to associate that with what we're trying to teach. The rule in my school is you have to have 10 years of shoeing horses as your sole source of income before I even consider hiring you. What I think makes a difference is that you've handled veterinarians, trainers, clients. You've had all the different types of crises that students are going to have. You know what's important and what is just, running off your back type stuff. I think it makes for a better student. It makes them more prepared to be successful when they get out of school, because they don't just know how to tack steel in the bottom of the feet. They know how to run a business as a sole proprietor. I think it's really important. The trimming is the essence of what we do, right? So as horseshoers, it doesn't matter how good you can make shoes, how well your shoes are made, how good they look. If you can't trim a foot correctly, it doesn't matter what appliance you put on it, it's not going to be good for the horse. So the trim, we start out virtually at day one talking about the trim. The forge work, they got to know how metal moves. They've got to know how metal moves. So there's lots of shoes that are available out there now, but if you don't have what that horse needs in your inventory, and you're incapable of adjusting a factory-made shoe or making another shoe, you're going to end up cheating horses. And that puts you down in what I call a backyard hoof hacker status, where you're shoeing every horse the exact same way every time, and you just don't have that opportunity to advance.
So the trimming and the forging, for me, I look at it as being able to see shapes. So if the student can't visualize what a balanced foot looks like through the distortion and how we get there, whether we can achieve it in one go or whether we have to add some mechanics to the shoe to account for our imbalance in the hoof capsule, and then also being able to just see the shape of the hoof capsule and then being able to make it at the amble. So I've been waking up at 2 a.m. since I started working at the school, thinking about how do I better explain shape, and so I have this little note on my phone, 2 a.m. mindings, that I made up. But to answer the question about trimming and forging, I think shape has to be talked about a lot in the two and how to bring them together. Because if your trim shape isn't complemented by your shoe shape, then it's not helpful for the horse.
It was a really interesting conversation I had with Jacob Butler. We were talking about the students that just struggle to see it. And he said something that I tried to school and is right on. We can show a student a foot and have them draw the shape. Some students draw it really closely, that's what they see. Others not even anywhere near close, and that's what they make. They make what they see, but what they see is not what the foot is. And so Piff's got some incredible PowerPoint and little things she puts together, little tests and quizzes and things for them to be able to start honing in their ability to see shapes. The first day of school, what I tell the students is, one, if you don't like shoeing horses, it's going to be a horrible way to make a living. Right? And it's a lifetime of learning. So the analogy that I use for our students is that after the end of the program, we take you to the edge of the cliff and we push you into the little lake. And the only thing we've taught you to do is the doggy paddle. We're trying to keep you from drowning. Continuing education is how you learn the breaststroke, the backstroke, right? Being able to go different directions, different speed. That's all incumbent upon continued education, which is the Hoof Care Summit, which I think is probably the biggest learning event in the United States for education, and then all our associations.
I think it's amazing to be able to have so many different ways to continue your education in the farrier industry. So one of those ways, I'm going to be really fortunate to be one of the farriers to go to on the American Farriers Association Edward Martin Cultural Exchange Program, and I leave August 2nd, and I'll be gone through October 31st. And the students teach me every day. Interacting with them, they teach me, but it's been a really long time since I've been able to be a student as a different. So I'm very, very excited. So I'm sure I'll be exposed to things I've never done before, and I can't wait.
Yeah, I'd rather she just stay here and read a book. I don't want to work 3 months by myself.
I think I learn more than the student learns from me because the student has to hyper focus on what we're teaching them in the moment, and it's brand new to them. And they might be visualizing and trying to wrap their brain around what we're trying to teach them, and they ask a question that I've never even thought to think about. And so they'll pose it in a way that I've never thought about that way. And I may have the answer, and I might have to think of a way to present it to them so that they understand it, or I might not have the answer and it pushes me to ask someone or go find in a book. But I think it's their curiosity. The cool thing about Farrier education is they chose to be here. And so they want it, they're hungry. And I don't really ask good questions as a person. I'm not a questioner. So when they ask me questions, it spurs me on to think about it in a deeper way. And oftentimes I can think of countless students that have been exceptional to teach, and they're inspiring in the way they learn and the way they process and take the information, and they're making a better product than I did for getting first out of school. And so it's pretty cool. I think they're inspiring that way.
I learned how to teach. So after 30, almost 32 years of the school, generally you've heard most of the questions, but I consider it a personal failure if I can't reach a particular student. And so I kind of get obsessed with why this particular student is not learning something. I mean, has he just quit? He doesn't want to be here. Grandma paid his way. He doesn't want to be here. I'm ready to excuse them early. But if they're struggling and they're trying, I learn different ways to present virtually everything we teach. How do I get this individual student up with the other students? What's the key to unlock his brain? It's not that he's stupid, right? And not that he can't learn. It's just that we got to figure out how to teach him. And that's you learn that with every class. Putting the spotlight on Farriers, I think it puts a spotlight on itself is the only thing it's doing. It's showing that we do not have a standardization of education in this country. We don't even have a standardized curriculum that each school would teach. And I think it makes it really apparent when you get a bunch of students from different schools in a room that I'm not an advocate of any government involvement in the school of any kind, in the industry of any kind. But I really would like to see a voluntary cooperation of schools to have some similar themes on teaching, anatomy, conformation, lameness, forge work, and some consistencies. I think that it's pretty glaring that there's a significant difference in the schools in the country. I think that's what they bring to light.
My thoughts are because of not necessarily the lack of standardization of the curriculum, but because there are so many routes to become a farrier, it makes it possible for anyone if they want to. So versus in other countries, if you don't get in on the ground right after you finish your high school or equivalent, it's difficult for you to enter the farrier industry. So I think the way the farrier education in the United States is currently, it does that well. It makes it available to anyone who wants it.
I think there's got to be some standardization in the teachers. There's got to be a certain level of experience and qualifications for teaching the programs. I don't think you can just have some kid who's got nowhere to go that hangs around and teaches. I think that you're getting an inferior quality. You're getting people that know how to nail on the bottom of the feet, but not that can go out and successfully run a practice. They're not really prepared to go out there and do all the things you have to do your first few years to survive long enough they get into continued education and to thrive.
It's difficult because I'm still so new to the industry and I haven't gotten to visit the other schools, so I know what we do well. The biggest thing to me is just mindset behind the education. And sometimes I think the horse gets lost in the primary education, and the research that's being done and the collaboration between the different equine professionals at the moment is at the point where it's pushing farriers to become better at what we do. We have to look outside the box. We have to be more professional in our interactions, and that requires a different mindset. And I think some of that mindset is started in the beginning stages of your continuing education. So that mindset is started off at school. So if we can foster a more collaborative mindset in working with equine professionals, that it might help long-term, have less defensiveness when our work is questioned, or be more open-minded to a specific approach if the horse needs it or requires it, or I don't know.
That's a good one. Can I do that one again? Is that what she said? Yeah, we got to get the students prepared for continued education, like one of your original questions was. They got to leave the school knowing that they don't have all the answers. This is just introductory level, and it's incumbent upon them to seek out the education. We're trying to get these guys enthusiastic about going to clinics, going to the summit, reading books, getting involved in the industry, and not just, here's your certificate, and now my brain disengages and I just shoot horses for 40 years. So we're trying to get these guys excited about clinics and continuing education and the different modalities of how we look at horses. And there's no such thing as a bad way to shoe a foundered horse necessarily. It's just this works. Here's all the things you get to pick from, but you need to be receptive to everything and run it through critical thinking and decide if it's for you.